back to Good Morning Tobago, guys. This morning we are talking about the oil spill, but specifically the tugboat that was found. Now, a couple weeks ago, we know tragedy struck the island when there was an oil spill off of the coast. But one of the questions that continued to pervade in the public space was, who was the owner of this boat and how did it get into Tobago waters, and why was it so difficult to track this boat? Now, this morning we're going to talk a bit about this and the status of it as we speak with Mr. Logan Williams, who is a senior data scientist at Bellingcat's investigative technology team. Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on this morning. We want to start off by finding out what your team at Bellingcats really do. What do you guys do? And what would have prompted you to get into investigating this? Well, I mean, obviously, it was a tragedy, and I guess you guys have the technology to do it. But what encouraged you to really go out there on social media, being brave, being bold enough to put yourself out there like that?
So Bellingcat is a really unique international nonprofit investigative news website and publication. And what we've pioneered is techniques that use publicly available information, things that you can find on the internet, on social media, and techniques for verifying that that's true and putting together these pieces into a story that can tell you something new, especially in situations where the people that really know what happened aren't willing to talk about it. It's kind of the best investigative technique that you can use. The other thing that Bellingcat does that is really important to us is we have this really active community of people online that enjoy helping find out these stories and untangle them. And it was actually our community on Discord, which anyone can join, that poking around and noticing that this mysterious ship might not be so mysterious after all, and that we might be able to find out what it was and what it was doing. And then that led to our investigation. Of course, this most recent publication, as well as the one from a couple weeks ago, was also a collaboration with Asha Javid at the Trinidad and Tobago Guardian. And it was a team effort by her, by our team, and by our broader community to put these puzzle pieces together.
Right. And what was some of the most interesting facts that you guys found when doing this investigation? And did it raise more eyebrows than when the investigation first began?
Certainly, every piece of new information that we found raised eyebrows even further, raised more questions for us. There was a lot of mystery going on in this case, and there still is. One of the first things we realized was that we could use satellite imagery to track the ship as it sailed towards Trinidad and Tobago over the weeks before the tragic incident. Every ship that's out there over a certain weight is legally required to transmit its location signal at all times. But a lot of times ships don't do this. And that's what we saw in this case as well, that the ship went dark for several days. And we used satellite imagery to look at where it was when it went dark. And we found that it was right offshore from Venezuela, near a major PDVSA port. And that raised our suspicions that it might be transporting Venezuelan oil. We also looked at people that were connected to the ship, and we found a lot of connections that we were able to verify using maritime records from the Zanzibar Maritime Authority that pointed to this company called Malaj Offshore Corporation. And when we looked into Malaj Offshore Corporation, we also found that they have a history of working with PDVSA to transport oil from Venezuela. So all of these things started piecing together into this really interesting story of a ship that seems to have visited Venezuela, picked up oil, and then ran into trouble offshore from Trinidad. We also found court records from Panama that detailed just how decrepit and unseaworthy the ship was, talked about major leaks in the hull, the fact that it was barely able to stay floating at port in Panama. And all of these things tell this story of a really irresponsible trip in a ship that might not have been fit to sail in the first place.
Interesting. And with these discoveries, I know this might be a difficult question to ask you, but what can Tobago do to truly advocate for justice in this case?
This is a good question. In this particular case, we're still looking into some of the open questions that are out there. Of course, the Solo Creed, we now know where it is, but we still don't know who owned the Gulf Stream when the accident happened, who owned the barge. And that would be the key to finding liability here, to make sure that whoever was responsible faces some consequences for that. International maritime law is really complicated and difficult because it relies on treaties between many different countries, many countries that disagree with each other on many things. And it can be difficult to establish accountability for things that happen on the open sea. I do think that there has been more scrutiny in recent years and even in recent weeks upon some of the regulatory loopholes, things like flags of convenience, ship classification that isn't really an inspection of seaworthiness, and these loopholes that have allowed incidents like this to happen. And I think that if Tobago continues to join the international pressure for more accountability in how ships are regulated, how they're inspected, and pushes for more cooperation between different states in the world that are part of the International Maritime Organization for how data is shared and for ensuring the reliability of information like who owns what ship and when was time it was inspected and what insurance does it carry. Those are things where I think we could hopefully see improvements in the years to come.
Things lead to assumptions that there was some level of illegal oil transportation going on with the companies. And if so, how would they be held accountable by international maritime law?
So one thing that we've seen in recent weeks in a completely different part of the world, in the Middle East, is several large oil tankers that were found to have been transporting oil from Iran to places where Iranian oil was under sanctions. And when that was published by, I believe, the New York Times a few months ago, the consequences were significant because insurers dropped the insurance that they had for those ships. And as a result, those ships were no longer able to enter many ports. So that's one of the avenues of enforcement here, that to enter many ports in the world, you need to have your paperwork in order. And if you make it difficult for people that are violating sanctions, that are skirting safety or certification regulations, if you make it difficult for those people to enter ports, then you make it difficult for them to conduct their business.
Understood. And what type of picture does this paint about what is happening out there in the Middle East in regards to maybe the struggle for power and why there is a particular vested interest in these places from, some black market oil dealers?
This is getting a little outside of my area of expertise, but I would say that whenever there are sanctions in place to try to prevent the movement of certain goods, such as oil, there will be people that see an opportunity to fill that niche and to transport that oil and to make money off of it because they can make more money if it's something that no one else is willing to do. So I think trying to find the places where there's leverage to disrupt those businesses that are trying to circumvent regulation is the best opportunity to ensure that there's more accountability on the ocean in the future.
Excellent. And do you see yourself partnering with the THA in the future to offer more information on your future investigations, as well as the info or the report that you have done? Are you planning to hand that over to the Tobago House of Assembly?
So, as an independent media outlet, we try to operate as independently and free from influence as possible. So, we publish all of our findings and all of our reports online in a way that anyone can see the evidence that we used to put that report forward. So this has already been used by the International Oil Pollution Compensation Funds in a report that they published a few weeks ago, using much of what we did with the TT Guardian and our community volunteers to help establish the story of what happened with the Gulf Stream. And certainly going forward, we will continue to publish new information as we find it, and to make sure that that information is in the hands of authorities like the Tobago House of Assembly, like the International Oil Pollution Compensation Funds, and so on, that can ensure that there can be some accountability in this situation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for giving us an insight into how your investigation would have led to uncovering so many details and answering a number of questions that a lot of persons have regarding the boats that were found out there on the coast during the oil spill. So, Mr. Williams, we want to thank you, and thank you to your investigative team, and we hope that you guys would continue doing the good work. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
Let's go!